This is Sports Charlotte, the podcast about sports in Charlotte. My name is Herb White, and I'm editor of the Charlotte Post. And of course, with me,
I'm back on a Monday.
Doomsday. Yeah,
On
on
a yeah,
Monday.
little Monday edition of the old Sports Charlotte. Cameron Williams, staff writer, and whatever else you want to call me for the Charlotte Post. We talked about the Hornets last week.
Hmm.
Talked about them making some trades, and now one of them has been revoked, and one of them is still pending.
Yeah,
I see you chuckling. Go ahead. What's your what's your thoughts on this?
well, I guess sometimes these things happen. It doesn't happen that often uh, in the NBA or most sports, most professional sports, period. But it's almost like, can the Hornets not get out of their own way?
Does not seem like it.
It doesn't. Or did the Lakers have something that resembles buyer's remorse, where it's like, well, maybe we won't get enough out of this potential investment in a Mark Williams to make it worth our while. So let's just undo it, go back to what we have, and do the best we can. I mean,
Yeah.
there's room for finger pointing wherever you want to point your finger. But I am just of a mindset that the Hornets, try as they might, something always goes wrong with these folks. And is that just dumb luck, or is that an organizational thing?
With this trade, I just don't know. It leads me to believe that it could have been a little bit of buyer's remorse type stuff, or Mark was just in really bad shape that the Hornets really didn't let on to. Because passing physicals kind of varies from organization to organization, and so were the Lakers being real picky? Because initially, a lot of people thought, well, okay, it's his back. He's still having back issues. Well, turns out it was reported later that there's apparently a lot more issues than just his back, and so the Lakers didn't feel it was going to be. He obviously they didn't pass him, so they rescinded the trade, and now it kind of leaves us wondering, well, what implications are this going to have moving him back to Charlotte? Is he going to be able to play here now? The Hornets gave this big long, spiel about we're welcoming Mark back, and it was tough to move him in the first place. Take that for what you will, but what's confusing me is even the Yusuf Nurkic and Vasa Micic and Cody Martin trade is still pending. None of these players are playing for either a Phoenix or Hornet or the Charlotte. So what's the holdup with that one? Um, as an organization, it really kind of taints your image if if especially if none of these trades are able to go through. But yeah, it was a head scratcher for sure.
Yeah. And the other side of that, and again, you know, trades go on all the time. But I guess in order to make nice or make peace with Mark Williams and welcoming him back to Charlotte, like, well, where else was he gonna go? It's not like you're gonna cut him free anyway because he was playing for you to start with. And I guess you could just cut him just for the sake of cutting him. But that doesn't sound like a very good idea right now either. So you are coming back to a hand that you dealt, and it doesn't necessarily look very good. But I'm not, because there's so much secrecy going on here where no one is saying exactly what the issue is. No one's just laying it bare for everybody to understand. But you hear and read about reports that says, well, it wasn't his back. So what is it?
I've seen a
Leave,
few different places say multiple issues with Hornets big man,
yeah.
but that
But
leaves the
what
seriously.
are I mean,
Exactly.
so, and then there was the narrative that it's not his back. Okay, so if it's not his back, what is it? And why is there such a discrepancy between the Hornets passing him in a physical and the Lakers flunking him? Is there that big of a gulf in the NBA between team doctors? You would think that everybody kind of has the same baseline in terms of, oh yeah, well, this person can play basketball at a certain level, but apparently not. And the Hornets, bless their hearts, are just going to have to come back and just try to deal with it as best they can. The season is shot anyway. So
Mhm.
does it really make that much of a difference?
I don't think it really makes a huge difference, but when I just you just signed Musa Diabate to an extension, and so it's clear that the Hornets' plans were not to have Mark around, and so now that you bring him back, and so now you've got Musa, you've got Yusuf pending that trade going through, and now Mark Williams. So now you're stuck with three centers again, where you just had Mark, Nick Richards, and Musa already. So now they're back in that same spot where you're divvying up playing time, and Musa's been playing really good. So I don't know how many minutes you can cut from him, being that he's been great on the defensive end. He really shut Wembanyama down the other night last Friday, and I mean that's tough to do regardless of any matchup. Wembanyama usually feasts on anybody, so I just think right now the Hornets are kind of in a backup and punt situation. They lose obviously Dalton Knecht, who I was really happy that they were able to get. Um, and that's another shooter that they're not going to be able to have on the floor. And also, um, Giannis Antetokounmpo was ruled out of the All-Star game, and so it gave Hornets fans hope that LaMelo Ball could take that spot.
Oh
Just a little
no.
bit ago, it was announced that Trae Young got that spot instead. So
Public
the Hornets can't
complaining
catch a break.
helps.
Yeah.
Public complaining helps. LaMelo was mellow. And it's almost like, well, hey, they do what they do. I move on. And what is the old proverb? The closed mouth doesn't get fed. Okay, so LaMelo didn't squawk about being overlooked, and this is what happens.
Yeah. Got a game tonight against the Brooklyn Nets. Obviously, at Brooklyn, Hornets won't be back in town till Lord March. Had a nice long homestand. Now they got a nice long away stand. So
Mhm.
it'll be interesting to just kind of follow them on the road and see if they can pick up any wins along the way. Some winnable games, I think tonight being one of them. But just overall, whew, they really can't catch a break. They got Magic and the Lakers, a game that was rescheduled because of the wildfires and the Nuggets. Trailblazers might be one they could win. Kings, maybe so. Then Warriors and Mavericks. Well, Mavericks won't have AD now, so it would be nice to see the Hornets get 3 wins out of their little away stand before they're back home against the Wizards on March 1st.
3 wins.
The Nets, I think for sure.
Mm.
Possibly the Trailblazers.
Hmm.
But man, the Lakers are going to be tough. Nuggets are going to be tough. Kings, obviously. So maybe they could pick up one against the Mavericks with no AD. Again,
The
Swift maybe,
Hornets
but
will be, they should be ecstatic if they can get two.
ecstatic.
Ecstatic if they can get two. This is a team that is too hurt, too short of talent to make any kind of run at any point in what remains of the season. They, you know, LaMelo Ball is whenever he's healthy enough to play, he'll play. And you never can tell when that will be. Brandon Miller, okay, we already know about his situation. Done deal, he's out. And there comes a time in the season, despite what coaches and some players will tell you, in interviews and that kind of thing. They've checked out. You know, not saying that they've checked out just yet, but there will come a time, as the weather warms up and everybody's attention starts to turn to spring and all that it entails. Let's just hurry up, play out the string. There will continue to be opportunities for some of these younger cats like KJ Simpson or Nick Smith Jr. to hone their skills and
which have both been really impressive.
themselves. And that'll be fine. But some of these dudes we already know are not necessarily NBA ready. So they can get themselves closer to ready. But as far as like winning, nah. And I can also understand why Hornets fans, those who are still paying attention at least, would be all in favor of tanking as best you can. But as we've talked about before, tanking doesn't necessarily guarantee you anything. So for everybody who's saying, yep, let's go in the toilet for Cooper Flag, with the Hornets' luck,
You end up getting the fifth pick.
yeah, they'll be way down the trough when it comes to that.
Well, final thoughts on this. I think the Hornets need to figure out what in the world's going on with Mark, first and foremost. If um if it comes to a case of the Lakers just having buyer's remorse, then I wish there was something that could be done about that. Because once you make a trade, it's like, okay, how tough are you making this physical to be passed? But it says multiple issues, and so now I just think, okay, figure out what's wrong with Mark. If it can be something that's fixable, or if push comes to shove, you just need to cut ties with the guy. I mean, he's productive when he's available,
Mhm.
but when is he
Sounds
really good
familiar.
at it? Yeah, exactly. So that's what I think that needs to happen there. But there was some positive basketball being played in Charlotte this past weekend.
Really?
Uh,
Where?
well, in Halton Arena, believe it or not,
Okay.
Bobby Lutz Day was held on Saturday, honoring the winningest coach in 49ers history at halftime. Hung a banner with his name on it in the rafters. So it was great to see that. But what was, in my opinion, better to see was the fact that Charlotte, even though they were down by 16 at one point, didn't give up, didn't hang their heads. They were able to come back and win that game. Almost couldn't write it any better. It's like, okay, you're honoring a great coach, you know, down at halftime, and then it's like you rally and you come back. So I think um, I think the 49ers are doing what they can to turn things in the right direction. Not gonna say they're gonna salvage this season or anything like that, but I think it might be too far gone to say anything crazy like that. But it's a good thing to see these guys not give up. When you're nine and whatever, it's easy to look and say, okay, there's no point in even trying anymore. But that doesn't seem to be anybody on the team's, I guess, motto or the way they're feeling right now. So I mean, I think to make this a good season, get a couple more wins, and hopefully don't lose anybody to the transfer portal. That's the biggest thing with Charlotte. And I mean, I'll let you chip in on this too, but you see it across all mid-major levels, especially, but even at the Power Five level now, it's like people want to hop from Power Five school to Power Five school trying to make the most money, and it's like sometimes the grass isn't always greener on the other side. Sometimes you just need to stick it out where you're at, but trying to get a 19, 20-year-old to understand that's not exactly easy.
Well, I think you also have to consider the times that we live in. Everybody's trying to get a bag. And let's face it, a lot of these dudes are never going to play in the NBA. So you get as much squeeze out of that collegiate orange as you can. And I don't blame the players necessarily. What they're doing is playing by the rules of a system that right now is in a bad spot. It's the Wild West. People can literally roll up to you and spirit you away from, your current school with the promise, not necessarily the delivery, but the promise of a huge payday.
Hmm.
And whether it's the NCAA or Congress, good luck there, or some other entity coming up with some guidelines, we're going to have to live with this. And the schools that have the bigger bag are going to be the ones who can get the better talent. And so if you're a mid-major, you're going to have to come up with a way to circumvent this. And you may have to start looking at things the way professional franchises start looking at things and constructing that roster on a year-to-year basis. And if you have a roster that's looking kind of shabby right now, you want to be beating the bushes right now, trying to figure out who do we identify to bring in next year. And of course, if it takes money, then you're going to have to figure out a way to get some folks paid and recruit towards something that's a little bit more tangible than just money. I mean, because not everybody's going to be into that. And it's the same thing that when one and done became a thing, where schools like Kentucky or North Carolina or Duke were just basically way stations for NBA caliber players, you know, and you would go off to the tournament and you would see these more experienced teams consistently competing with and beating the one and dones.
Hmm.
So I think as a coach or the people who are responsible for putting together these rosters, you're going to have to look at it from that standpoint. How do we turn our relative lack of money into something that is counter to that narrative? And so, I would think that, a school like Charlotte isn't going to have UNC money. It's not going to have uh, Southern Cal money, but you're going to have to come up with something in order to be able to compete as a
Yeah.
mid-major. And the whole thing is in terms of the tournament itself, it's skewed against the mid-major conferences anyway. So you got to
Mhm.
figure it out.
Yeah, and it's funny. We talked with colleague at the Hornets game about a week ago, Jim Morrison. He One thing that he said that really resonated with me is that Charlotte it's a school that it's like unless you went there, you're not really a fan of them. And that to me, it's like okay, you got this national brand like UNC Chapel Hill, who I dare say 85 to 90% of their fans didn't go there.
Can't
So
even
it's
find
like,
Chapel Hill.
and Charlotte, while it's not necessarily located in Center City, is still located within the 485 Charlotte Mecklenburg Loop. So what's it going to take to get people in the city, backing this team, even if they didn't go there necessarily? What's it going to take to become one of those brands? And it's an age-old question that I don't really have an answer to, but it's something that needs to be looked at because unless you're able to get more backing from a random Joe Schmo that's like, okay, well, I live in Charlotte and why not back the home team kind of thing. Um, it, unless you're able to get those kinds of into those kinds of pockets, I don't really see this issue changing because you've got your tried and true 49er fans that are donating to the NIL fund, but that money's only going to go so far, and you can't expect everyone to be able to donate tens of thousands of dollars. That's just not feasible.
Yeah. Well, and you've got these built-in disadvantages. You talked about North Carolina. North Carolina has generations, multiple generations of fans, and it's grown from North Carolina to national and maybe even international. So if you're a school like Charlotte, the only way that you can really build it is you've got to win and you've got to win big.
Yeah.
And to me, a good case in point would be Georgetown. Now, when John Thompson was the coach of the Hoyas basketball program, they went from who to fabulous just like that.
Hmm.
And it became a national and international brand. They won big. They played a certain brand of basketball that resonated with folks, and it just grew itself until Thompson stepped aside, the winning stopped, and then it went back to who? So now they're trying to bring it back with a second year coach who is putting in really good results. And so is coming back as a basketball brand. But we've seen this happen. If you want to go from irrelevant to relevant, you've got to win and you've got to win big. And Charlotte hasn't done that. 1974 to 77, not, that period of time, yes, they won and won big, captured a lot of national attention with the run to the Final Four. But think about that. That's 1977. That's darn near 50 years ago.
Well,
So,
I mean, even the Bobby Lutz days was pushing, it's over 15 years ago. And that's, I mean, that's when you talk to the majority of Charlotte fans, and yes, the 70s was probably their most like li put in the
that's their
limelight
best period.
period. Yeah. And I mean, and that's fair to say, but you got a coach who is the winningest coach in the program's history, went to multiple NCAA tournaments. And so, I mean, they were in the forefront, not necessarily forefront, but I mean, they were prominent, constantly making NCAA tournaments in the early 2000s, and
Yeah,
even
but that wasn't enough. That's not enough. Like I said, you got to win, which he did, and you've got to win big, which means Elite Eights, Final Fours, that kind of thing. I mean, Steph Curry put Davidson on the map for an Elite Eight run.
yeah, but I mean,
And as
what
soon as he left, what happened?
exactly? Yeah.
That's the
I
point.
mean,
It's got to be sustained.
so okay, I'll ask you this. How is that going to be possible? It's like I said, you got to have donors that want to give money to the school, that want to be supportive of the school and a fan of their programs without necessarily having a 4-year piece of paper from them.
Well, that's why you have to be able to figure it out. I mean, you've got to put in an infrastructure that will allow you to be able to do that. So some of it will probably take money. There's no getting around that. If you want that kind of excellence, you're going to have to pay for it. But you're going to pay for it one way or the other anyway, whether it's facilities, coaching staff, support. And nowadays, that means NIL. And even if you turn that NIL into, well, we're going to pay this dude or these dudes for 1 year. And if it's like, well, you know what? We think we can do better. And you go find yourself some more dudes and give them that NIL bag. And if you have to keep rotating it, everybody's a mercenary these days. So the programs may have to make some adjustments to keep up with the times. If if the athletes are going to be mercenaries, then the programs are probably going to have to do something too.
Fair enough. It'll be interesting to see what Charlotte can do to kind of piggyback off that momentum they had Saturday and got a game tonight in Boca Raton against Florida Atlantic, 9 p.m. tip. Boy, but big underdog. I think right now it's right on 11-point underdog. So we'll see what they do there. Got a game Saturday back inside Halton Arena. But yeah, it's gonna take an army, I'd say. Not it's not only a money issue, but it's a support issue, and we'll see what can be changed. But it's an issue that's going to constantly keep Charlotte middling or even towards the bottom of the American Athletic Conference, which right now, I mean, they're really struggling. It's nice to see a momentum win like they had Saturday, but being able to sustain that, like you said, sustain success and being able to compete for conference championships is where they need to start. Had a great run last season with players that clearly were really good. Igor Milicic at Tennessee had one of the best statistical games in NCAA history as far as shooting percentage, points, rebounds, and all that production. So Charlotte has had good players, and one thing Fern said was he doesn't think the school gets enough credit for the players that they've been able to develop. I mean, you got Jameer Young, who's in the G League right now with the Nuggets organization. He's tearing it up. Um, you obviously got all these guys going to different Power Five or Power Four schools that are tearing it up as well. But it's going to come down to being able to keep players like that to build a program at Charlotte. And
They're gonna
until
run with them.
exactly until they have the resources to do that and the support behind the program, it's just not something that's feasible. So it's kind of like we've said before on this show, it's a chicken and egg thing. You got to have the support to have the team, but if you don't have the team, a lot of the support starts to dwindle. So they're kind of they're in a rough spot, but we'll see how the rest of the season shakes out and who they're able to bring in via the transfer portal and who they're able to retain.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, to be seen, to be determined. But we will go off on one little piece of business before we roll out. I guess this is the day after the Super Bowl. Was there anything that stood out with that in the, and let's hold it to real quick, a couple of minutes just to talk it over.
Well, the biggest thing that stood out to me was as good defensively as Kansas City was against Saquon Barkley. Boy, did they give up everything else.
Yeah.
I mean, when you look at that score, you're like, okay, well, Saquon Barkley probably had 200 yards and three touchdowns. He didn't even come close. I mean, they did a really good job scheming for him. No one else apparently, but like I said, I mean, it was really odd to me to see that score be so inflated when they did their probably their best defensive performance against one of the best, if not the best running back in the league this year.
Yeah. Yeah. I think Kansas City made the grave mistake of daring Philadelphia to beat them throwing the ball. And it was exacerbated by the Eagles' defense being as good as it was. I mean, that
Oh
pass,
yeah.
even goats can be turned into something else when you're pressuring them. So, uh, Philly did a really good job in terms of the defense, and Jalen Hurts played out of his mind. Uh,
Yeah.
Obviously, Kansas City was thinking, "We dare you to beat us," and he went right on out there and did it. So, kudos to him. It was not the most competitive or thrilling Super Bowl ever, and let's just leave it at that.
Yeah. And now the Panthers are going to win the Super Bowl in 2026, right?
It's the NFL. Anything can happen. Yeah. I think Panthers fans would just be okay with being close to sniffing the playoffs. You have to build up to these things.
True, true. Well, I'll go ahead and give the little pitch. Be sure to support our work. Go to our website, thecharlottepost.com. Become a subscriber, a donor, and while you're at it, subscribe to the newsletter, all that fun jazz. As Herb likes to say, the while the podcast and the reporting is free to y'all, reporting getting free. So support our work, and we'll be sure to continue to provide the best coverage in the Charlotte area. How'd I do?
I think that's spot on.
There you go.
And so for everybody at the Charlotte Post with Cameron over in beautiful Derrida, I'm Herb.
And I'm quadruple P. I got that P back right. Finally.
Now, still
I'm
working on it.
still
Still,
working.
but thank you for listening and watching.